The red warning light on the bridge of Imperial scout ship Horizon blinked 3 times before catching Captain Tom Reed's attention. He moved away from the large observation window where he had been watching the strange pulsar cluster that made this sector of space forbidden to most ships. The sensor panel showed something that shouldn't exist, an energy reading from deep within the radiation zone. "Computer, run diagnostic check on sensor array," Tom ordered, assuming the intense radiation was causing equipment malfunction. The ship's systems hummed quietly for a moment before confirming all sensors were working perfectly. The energy signature remained on screen, pulsing steadily like a heartbeat. Tom scratched his graying beard and called his science officer. "Jack, come take a look at this." The younger officer hurried over, his eyes widening as he studied the readings. The energy pattern was like nothing in the Imperial database. It appeared to be some kind of artificial field, but it was far too stable to be any known shield technology. "Sir, these readings suggest something is actively managing the radiation in that sector," Jack said, his fingers dancing across the control panel as he ran more scans. "But that's impossible. This region has been marked as dead space for over 5 centuries due to the pulsar radiation. Nothing could survive here." Tom walked back to the observation window, his weathered face reflecting in the reinforced glass. 20 years of Imperial scouting service had taught him that impossible often meant they weren't asking the right questions. He made his decision. Launch 3 probe drones. Full sensor package. Let's see what's hiding in that radiation field. The bridge crew moved with practiced efficiency, and soon 3 sleek silver probes shot out from the Horizon's launch tubes, their ion engines glowing blue against the star-filled backdrop. As the probes approached the energy signature, the sensor data became clearer. What they found made Tom's heart race. The energy readings weren't just random patterns. They formed a perfect sphere nearly 50,000 kilometers in diameter. Inside this sphere, the deadly radiation from the pulsar cluster was almost completely absent. "Sir," Jack called out, his voice tight with excitement, "the probes are picking up artificial structures inside the field. Metal, concrete, refined materials. This isn't some natural phenomenon. Someone built this." Tom leaned forward in his captain's chair, watching as the probe data painted an impossible picture. Inside the protective sphere, an entire civilization existed. The sensors detected cities, orbital stations, and ships moving in careful patterns. But what truly shocked him was when the chemical analysis came back from the atmosphere inside the sphere. It was perfectly calibrated for human life. "Send the emergency signal to Imperial Command," Tom ordered, his voice steady despite his racing thoughts. "Priority 1. Tell them we found something that changes everything we thought we knew about this sector." As the faster-than-light message beamed out toward Imperial space, Tom studied the sensor readings again. In all his years of service, he'd seen countless wonders and oddities in the vastness of space. But this was different. Someone had done the impossible. They had created a safe haven in one of the deadliest regions of known space, and they had done it with technology that surpassed anything in the Imperial database. The next few hours were a blur of activity. More probes were launched, more scans were taken, and Tom wrote and rewrote his official report multiple times. How could he properly explain what they had found? How could he convey the magnitude of this discovery? Just as he finished another revision of his report, Jack rushed onto the bridge. "Captain, we're picking up a transmission from inside the sphere. They know we're here." Tom straightened in his chair. First contact protocols began running through his mind, but before he could give any orders, the transmission cleared up. A calm human voice came through the speakers, speaking perfect standard English with an accent he couldn't quite place. "Imperial scout ship, you have entered monitored space. Please maintain your position. We haven't had visitors in a very long time. We have much to discuss." Tom looked around at his stunned crew. They had come expecting to find empty space, or at most some ancient ruins. Instead, they had found something far more extraordinary. a lost branch of humanity that had not just survived but thrived in a place where survival should have been impossible. The real question was, how would the Empire react to this discovery? As Tom prepared to respond to the transmission, he couldn't shake the feeling that the galaxy was about to change in ways no one could predict. Ambassador Marcus Gray stood at the viewing port of his diplomatic vessel, watching as they approached the massive energy shield. The Empire's fastest ships had brought him and his team to this sector in record time after Captain Reed's discovery. Now, facing the impossible barrier of swirling energy, Marcus felt a mix of excitement and unease. "We're receiving guidance signals," the pilot announced. "They're directing us to a specific entry point in the shield." Marcus nodded, his silver hair catching the light from the nearby pulsar cluster. Behind him, his team of diplomats and scientists whispered among themselves, their voices carrying a nervous energy. None of them had expected their first meeting to be with humans rather than aliens. The shield rippled like water as their ship passed through the designated entry point. The change was immediate and striking. Outside, the sensors had shown lethal levels of radiation, but inside, they detected conditions perfect for human life. Several small escort vessels approached them, their designs unlike anything in Imperial records. "Their ships are more elegant than ours," commented Dr. Smith, the team's technology expert. "Look at how they move. No visible propulsion system at all." The escort vessels guided them to a massive space station that hung in orbit around what appeared to be a thriving world. As they docked, Marcus studied the station's architecture. It seemed to flow like liquid metal, yet sensors indicated it was harder than any material known to the Empire. A welcoming party waited in the docking bay. Marcus had prepared himself for many possibilities, but the sight still caught him off guard. The people looked human, yet their clothing and bearing were distinctly different from Imperial citizens. They wore flowing garments that seemed to shift colors with their movements, and they carried themselves with a quiet confidence that bordered on serenity. Their leader stepped forward, a tall woman with dark skin and wise eyes. "Welcome to Haven Station. I am Director Ann Miller. We've been watching your Empire's expansion for some time, though we didn't expect contact quite so soon." Marcus moved to introduce himself, falling back on decades of diplomatic training. "Ambassador Marcus Gray, representing the Galactic Empire. We had no idea anyone had survived here after the pulsar cluster became active." Ann's smile held a hint of pride. "Survived? Ambassador, we have done far more than survive. Please, follow me. There is much to show you." They walked through corridors that seemed to adjust their environment automatically for optimal comfort. Anne explained as they walked, her voice carrying easily despite the large group. "When the pulsar cluster began its deadly cycle 5 centuries ago, our ancestors faced a choice: abandon their homes or find a way to adapt. They chose to adapt." The tour led them to an observation deck that offered a breathtaking view of the planet below. Cities gleamed under the protected sky, their architecture a perfect blend of nature and technology. Transport vessels moved in graceful patterns between orbital stations and the surface. "How many people live here?" Marcus asked, trying to process the scale of what he was seeing. "Just over 10 million in this system alone," Anne replied. "We have similar settlements in 3 neighboring systems, all protected by our shield network." Dr. Smith couldn't contain himself any longer. "The shield technology. It's beyond anything we've seen. The energy requirements alone should make it impossible." Anne's expression grew serious. "What you call impossible, we call Tuesday, Ambassador. Our isolation forced us to look at problems differently. When survival depends on innovation, you'd be surprised what becomes possible." Marcus noticed something else as they continued their tour. The people they passed seemed genuinely happy, fulfilled. There was none of the rigid social hierarchy he was used to in the Empire, no visible signs of the stress that came with Imperial life. "Your society," he said carefully, "it seems very different from ours." "It is," Anne agreed. "We had to reshape more than our technology to survive here. We had to reshape our entire way of thinking. The shield that protects us from radiation, it's just the most visible part of the changes we made. As Marcus prepared for their first formal meeting, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was standing at a pivotal moment in human history. The Empire had come expecting to find a lost colony in need of help and integration. Instead, they had found something far more challenging, a civilization that had taken a completely different path and succeeded beyond anything they could have imagined. The real diplomatic work was just beginning, and Marcus suspected it would be unlike any negotiation in Imperial history. These people didn't need the Empire's help or protection. The question was, what would the Empire do with that knowledge? Dr. Alice Walker's office in the Haven Archives was unlike anything the Imperial visitors had ever seen. Instead of data screens and computers, the walls shifted with living holograms showing the colony's history. The room itself seemed to breathe, adjusting its lighting and temperature to match the emotional tone of the conversation. "You want to know how we survived," Alice said, her eyes bright with intelligence, as she faced Ambassador Gray and his team. "But to understand that, you need to know why we chose to stay when others fled." She waved her hand, and the room darkened. The three-dimensional image of the solar system appeared around them, showing the moment when the pulsar cluster first became active. The Imperial scientists leaned forward, captivated by the display technology alone. 500 years ago, our long-range sensors detected the change in the cluster, Alice continued. The calculations were clear. We had 6 months before the radiation would make this entire sector uninhabitable. The Colonial Council at the time faced a choice: evacuate over 2 million people with limited ships or find another way. The hologram shifted to show the original colonial city, much smaller than the current one. People moved through the streets in a panic as the sky began to change color from the approaching radiation storm. "Most thought we were crazy to stay," Alice said, her voice soft with remembered pain. The Empire had already written off this sector. But our chief scientist, Dr. Robert Page, had a theory. He believed we could use the radiation itself as a power source to create a protective field. The hologram showed a team of scientists working desperately in laboratories, testing theories and failing repeatedly as the deadline approached. The breakthrough came from an unlikely source, Alice explained. A child's toy, a simple magnetic field generator that created small force bubbles. Dr. Page realized we were thinking too conventionally about energy fields. The display changed to show the first prototype shield generator. Instead of trying to block the radiation, we learned to guide it. The shield doesn't stop the radiation. It redirects it, creates a flow pattern that leaves safe spaces in its wake, like standing in the calm eye of a storm. Ambassador Gray touched one of the holographic images, watching it ripple under his finger. "But the energy requirements must be enormous." Alice smiled. "That's the beauty of it. Once we understood the principles, we realized we could use the radiation itself to power the shields. The more intense the radiation became, the stronger our protection grew. We turned our greatest threat into our greatest asset." The room filled with images of the colony's transformation over the centuries. New buildings rose, designed to work with the shield technology rather than against it. The population grew as they refined their techniques and expanded their safe zone. But survival wasn't just about technology, Alice continued. We had to change how we lived, how we thought about community and progress. The shields work because every part of our society works together, like a living organism. Our cities, our ships, even our clothes, everything is connected to the shield network. She showed them images of the early failures, times when sections of the shield had flickered because of social discord or resource competition. We learned that technology alone wasn't enough. The shields respond to harmony, both technological and social. We had to build a society as carefully balanced as the energy fields protecting us. The Imperial scientists scribbled notes frantically, but Ambassador Gray was starting to understand the deeper implications. "You're saying the shield technology can't be separated from your way of life." "Exactly." Alice nodded. Many of our early attempts failed because we tried to force the technology to work our way. Success only came when we learned to work with the natural flows of energy, both physical and social. Every child here learns shield harmonics alongside their basic education. It's not just a technology we use, it's a fundamental part of who we are. The hologram showed the current state of their civilization. Multiple shield-protected systems connected by energy corridors, millions of people living in harmony with forces that should have destroyed them. This is why we stayed hidden for so long, Alice concluded. We knew the Empire would eventually find us, but we needed to be sure our way of life was strong enough to survive contact. The question now is, are you ready to understand what we've become? The Imperial delegation sat in thoughtful silence, watching the flowing images of a civilization that had taken a dramatically different path from their own. They had come seeking answers about shield technology, but found themselves facing questions about the very nature of human progress and adaptation. Director James Pierce paced in his private chamber aboard the Imperial science vessel, Discovery, his footsteps echoing against the metal floor. The preliminary reports from Haven Colony lay scattered across his desk, each one more remarkable than the last. After 3 weeks of observation, the Imperial Science Council was both amazed and frustrated. "Play the shield analysis again," he commanded. The room's display system activated, showing the complex energy patterns that protected Haven. Beautiful waves of light danced across the screen, following patterns that defied Imperial physics. A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. "Enter," he called out, not taking his eyes off the display. His lead researcher, Mary Wilson, walked in with another stack of data tablets. "Sir, we've completed the latest scans," she said, her excitement barely contained. "Their shield technology isn't just advanced, it's revolutionary. The energy efficiency is off our charts. A single Haven shield generator can protect more space than our entire defense network, using less power than a city's lighting system." James finally turned from the display, and yet they refused to share the specifications. 3 separate diplomatic meetings, and all we get are vague explanations about harmony and social integration. "That's just it, sir," Mary replied, spreading out her findings. "I don't think they're being intentionally difficult. Look at these readings. The shield's strength actually varies with population density and social activity. It's strongest over their public gathering spaces and weakest over uninhabited areas. But it's all one interconnected system." The door chimed again. This time, Admiral John West entered, his Imperial uniform pristine as always. "Pierce, tell me you have something I can take to the Council. The military applications of this technology are incredible." "Yes," James finished for him. "Imagine our ships protected by shields that grow stronger under attack. Colonies that could survive anywhere, regardless of environmental conditions. But we can't just copy their technology. It's integrated into everything they do." The Admiral's face darkened. "The Empire didn't become the dominant force in the galaxy by accepting limitations, Director. Find a way." Mary spoke up, her voice careful. "Sir, we've been studying their children's education programs. Every citizen learns to work with the shield network from an early age. It's like they've developed a sixth sense for energy fields. Our instruments show tiny fluctuations in the shields that match their emotional states." James picked up a data tablet showing Haven's power distribution network. Their entire civilization is built around this technology. The shield doesn't just protect them, it connects them. Their ships, their homes, even their clothes all feed into and draw from the same energy field. "Then we start smaller," Admiral West insisted. "Surely we can adapt some portion of the technology for our purposes. The Council is getting impatient. Other factions are already pushing for more aggressive approaches." James shared a worried look with Mary. They both knew what aggressive approaches meant in Imperial terms. But the Admiral wasn't wrong about the Council's impatience. Every day they spent studying Haven made the Empire's own technology seem more primitive by comparison. "There's something else," Mary added, pulling up new data. The colony's shield network is growing. They're not just maintaining their protection. They're slowly expanding it, creating new habitable zones in the radiation field. At this rate, they could reclaim the entire sector within a century. Admiral West's eyes narrowed. Expansion without conquest. The Council won't like that either. It challenges everything the Empire stands for. James walked to his window, watching Haven's shield shimmer in the distance. Maybe that's exactly what we need. Their technology, their whole society. It's not just different from ours. It's better in many ways. More efficient, more sustainable. Careful, Director, the Admiral warned. That kind of talk borders on sedition. It's not sedition to acknowledge reality, James replied firmly. We came here thinking we'd found a lost colony to rescue. Instead, we found humans who've surpassed us by taking a completely different path. The real question is, are we humble enough to learn from them? The Admiral left without answering, his stiff posture showing his displeasure. James turned back to his data, knowing time was running out. The Empire's interest in Haven's technology was growing by the day, and not everyone would be as patient as the Science Council. Soon, someone would demand results, one way or another. Robert Blake walked through Haven's central garden dome, where trees from old Earth grew alongside new hybrid species developed over centuries of isolation. The Imperial observers followed him, their stiff uniforms looking out of place among the flowing shapes of Haven architecture. He could feel their confusion through the shield network, a constant buzz of disbelief and frustration. You must understand, Robert explained, stopping near a flowering tree. When we say our technology is part of our culture, we mean it literally. Feel this. He placed his hand on the tree's trunk. The nearby shield section brightened slightly, responding to the biological connection. The Imperial Science Officer, Dr. Wilson, stepped forward eagerly with her scanning device. Remarkable. The shield strength just increased by 3% in this section. But how do you control it? We don't control it, Robert said patiently. We work with it. The shield responds to life, to harmony. It's why our cities look the way they do. Buildings grown, rather than built, spaces that flow together naturally. Another Imperial officer, Captain Mike Baker, frowned. But surely you have a central control system. Command protocols. How do you maintain order? The question made Robert smile. This was always the hardest part for the Imperials to grasp. Order isn't imposed here, Captain. It emerges naturally from the way we live. Watch. He gestured to a group of children playing nearby. As they ran and laughed, the shield above them rippled with soft colors, adjusting its strength to protect their increased activity. The plants around them seemed to lean into their joy, and the very air felt lighter. Your empire builds walls to separate things, Robert continued. We build connections. Every person here is linked to the shield network from birth. We feel each other's needs, share resources automatically. The technology responds to that sharing. Dr. Wilson's scanner beeped rapidly. The energy efficiency is incredible. But how do you handle conflicts? Competition for resources. Competition. Robert shook his head. What would be the point? If I take more than I need, the shield weakens. If my neighbor suffers, we all feel it. Our technology made us realize what humanity always knew but forgot. We're all connected. They reached the community dining hall, where hundreds of people shared the evening meal. The Imperials watched in amazement as food was distributed without any visible organization system, yet everyone got exactly what they needed. Captain Baker's hand kept straying to where his weapon would usually be. Haven's shield system had politely but firmly disabled all Imperial weapons upon their arrival. This is all very peaceful, he said, making it sound like a criticism. But what about progress? Competition drives innovation. Robert gestured to the ceiling, where the shield's energy patterns danced in beautiful, complex patterns. Does this look stagnant to you? We advance constantly, but we do it together. Our children learn calculus by watching shield harmonics. Our art shapes energy fields. Even our dreams contribute to the network. A small disturbance caught their attention. Two teenagers were having a heated argument over a shared project. The Imperials tensed, but Robert remained calm. Around the arguing pair, the shield dimmed slightly, and nearby adults naturally drifted closer. Within minutes, the conflict was resolved through quiet discussion and mutual understanding. That's how our society works, Robert explained. The shield shows us when something's wrong, and we fix it together. No laws needed, no enforcement, just people caring for people. Dr. Wilson looked troubled. But the Empire's strength comes from clear hierarchy, from strong leadership making decisive choices. And how's that working out? Robert asked gently. Your own reports show rising unrest in the outer colonies, resources stretched thin by constant expansion. How much energy do you waste just maintaining control? The Imperials shifted uncomfortably. They'd seen enough of Haven's technology to know it far surpassed their own. Yet everything about this society challenged their most basic assumptions about how civilization should work. As the day ended, Haven's artificial sun dimmed slowly. Its light filtered through shield layers to create a stunning sunset. Robert watched the Imperial observers taking more readings, making more notes. He knew they still didn't understand, couldn't understand, that Haven's true power wasn't in its technology at all. The real challenge wouldn't be protecting Haven's secrets. It would be helping the Empire see that they were trying to steal the wrong things. The shield technology was just a tool. The real advancement was in the hearts and minds of Haven's people, who had learned to live as one. The attack came during Haven's rest cycle. 3 Imperial warships dropped out of hyperspace, their weapons charging. They weren't part of the official diplomatic fleet. These were darker ships, painted in stealth colors, running without identification signals. Inside Haven's central control room, Robert watched the shield network's response. The energy field rippled with new patterns, automatically strengthening around population centers. He felt the collective concern of his people through the network. Not panic, but a deep, steady readiness. Unknown vessels, he broadcast. You have entered protected space without authorization. Power down your weapons. The only response was a barrage of energy torpedoes. They struck Haven's shield, and something remarkable happened. Instead of exploding against the barrier, the torpedo's energy was absorbed, making the shield glow brighter. The attacking ships paused, clearly surprised by this outcome. Director Pierce, Robert called over the official Imperial channel. I believe some of your people are acting without approval. James Pierce's voice came back immediately, heavy with concern. Those ships aren't under my command. Admiral West disappeared 6 hours ago with a splinter group. We're tracking them now, but another volley of torpedoes hit the shield. Again, the energy was absorbed, making Haven's protection even stronger. Through the network, Robert could feel his people responding, their collective focus adding to the shield's power. We don't want to harm them, Robert said calmly, but we will defend ourselves. The attack ships spread out, trying a new tactic. Energy beams lanced out, attempting to cut through the shield at different points. But something was happening that the Imperial sensors couldn't detect. Haven's children were waking up, and their dreams were feeding into the shield network, adding layers of protection that moved like liquid light. In the Imperial diplomatic vessel, Mary Wilson stared at her readings in awe. Sir, the shield strength is increasing exponentially. It's not just defending. It's growing, learning from each attack. Admiral West's voice cut through all channels. You can't hide this technology forever. The Empire needs it. The good of the many outweighs. The good of the many. Robert interrupted. Look around you, Admiral. Really look. The shield shifted, becoming transparent in sections. Through the clear patches, the Admiral could see into Haven's cities. Children slept peacefully in their beds despite the attack. Adults gathered in community centers, their combined focus visible as patterns of light in the shield. The whole colony moved like a single organism, responding to threat not with fear, but with unity. "Your weapons can't hurt us," Robert continued softly. "Not because our shields are strong, though they are, but because you don't understand what you're really attacking. The shield isn't a weapon or a defense system. It's us, all of us, working together." As if to demonstrate, the shield began to change. It expanded outward, gently pushing the attack ships back. Where the energy field touched their hulls, their weapon systems shut down one by one. Not damaged, just quietly, peacefully turned off. "That's impossible," Admiral West whispered. "The power requirements." "Power isn't just about energy," Robert explained. "It's about connection. Right now, every child's dream, every parent's love, every moment of trust between our people is feeding into the shield. How can your weapons compete with that?" In the Imperial flagship, Director Pierce turned to his staff. "Are you recording this?" "All of it." Mary nodded, her eyes wide. "Sir, I don't think Admiral West attacked because he wanted the shield technology anymore. I think he attacked because what Haven represents terrifies him. It proves that everything the Empire believes about power and control is wrong." The shield continued its gentle expansion. Where it touched Imperial ships, crew members felt something strange, a moment of connection, a sense of being part of something larger than themselves. Some wept. Others simply stood in wonder. "We could disable your ships completely," Robert said to the Admiral. "We could take your weapons, your engines, your controls. But we won't, because that's not who we are. Instead, we offer you a choice. Stay, learn, understand what real power looks like, or leave, knowing that you didn't fail to take our technology. You failed to see what it actually is." The attack ships hung in space, their weapons dark, their crews silent. In Haven's cities, life continued peacefully. The shield rippled with colors no Imperial sensor could properly record, its strength built not from power plants or energy cells, but from the simple, unshakable unity of its people. 1 month after the failed attack, Haven's Great Assembly Hall hosted a gathering unlike any in human history. Representatives from the Empire sat together with Haven's people, not as visitors or observers, but as students. The shield above them danced with possibilities, its patterns reflecting the historic change taking place below. Admiral West stood before the assembly, his Imperial uniform replaced with the simpler clothing of Haven. His voice carried clearly through the hall. "I came here believing in the Empire's right to claim advanced technology for the greater good. I was wrong. What Haven has created isn't a technology that can be taken. It's a way of life that must be learned." Director Pierce stepped forward next, accompanied by Mary Wilson. They had spent the past month fully immersed in Haven society, learning to feel the subtle connections of the SHIELD network. "Our initial findings were correct, but completely missed the point," Mary explained. "The SHIELD technology is amazing, yes, but it's only a small part of what makes Haven extraordinary." In the center of the hall, Robert activated a display showing the first successful integration of Imperial technology with Haven's SHIELD network. A small Imperial scout ship hovered in the image, surrounded by the gentle glow of SHIELD energy. "The breakthrough came when we stopped trying to adapt our shield to your ships," Robert explained. "Instead, we helped your crew adapt to the shield." The hall's attention turned to the scout ship's crew, who had volunteered for the experiment. Their commander spoke, her voice full of wonder. "At first, we thought we were learning to control the shield. But you don't control it, you become part of it. It's like learning to breathe underwater. The moment you stop fighting it, stop trying to force it, everything changes." Ambassador Gray, who had watched the entire process unfold, addressed the assembly. "The Empire has always measured progress by our ability to control our environment, to bend the universe to our will. Haven shows us a different path, one where we succeed by learning to work with the natural flow of energy and life." The shield above rippled in agreement, its colors shifting to match the mood of understanding that spread through the crowd. Through the network, Haven's people could feel the genuine change in their Imperial visitors, the slow awakening to a new way of thinking. Robert walked to the center of the hall. We stayed hidden for centuries, perfecting our technology and our society. But we always knew this day would come. The question was never if we would share our knowledge, but whether others would be ready to receive it. The display changed to show the expansion of Haven's shield network over the past month. New patterns had emerged, showing the first successful blending of Imperial and Haven technology. It wasn't a perfect copy of Haven's shields, but something new, a hybrid system that represented the first steps toward a different future. "This is just the beginning," Mary added. "The Empire's resources and reach, combined with Haven's understanding of energy and community, imagine what we could achieve together." The assembly hall's shield brightened as children entered, carrying small projects they had created with their Imperial counterparts. Each item showed a tiny piece of shield technology, not imposed from above, but grown naturally from cooperation and understanding. Admiral West watched the children with deep emotion. "I came here to take your shields by force. Instead, you showed us that real power doesn't come from control. It comes from connection. The Empire has spent centuries building walls between worlds. Perhaps it's time we learn to build bridges instead." The shield network extended through the hall, touching each person present. Imperials who had spent weeks learning Haven's ways felt it clearly now. The subtle web of energy that connected all living things, the power that came from working in harmony rather than opposition. Robert looked out over the assembly, feeling the hope and potential flowing through the network. "This is how humanity advances," he said quietly. "Not through conquest or control, but through understanding and growth. Every person here today carries a spark of this knowledge now. The real question is, what will we build together?" Above them, the shield continued its eternal dance, protecting and connecting, showing humanity a path forward that nobody had imagined possible. In its shifting patterns, Imperial and Haven citizens alike could see the first glimpses of a future where technology and society grew together, where progress meant more than just power, where humanity's greatest strength lay not in domination, but in harmony.